Whispers from the past. He knew it would.
My great-grandfather's name was Albert Phillips, and this is all we knew about him until shortly before my grandfather died, and he died in 2002. We knew he was killed in action during the First World War, but that's all. We knew absolutely nothing more about him. We did know at some point he was in the cavalry, and we did have the name of his later regiment. I believe it was the Queen's Regiment. When my grandfather was very ill, the local GP came round to visit him and said they started talking about history and where they'd been, and the story came out that my great-grandfather was somewhere in France and nobody in the family knew where. So the doctor said, well, you can now access through the internet the War Graves Commission, and you can find out if you know some detail about him. So we did have the Queen's Regiment, and we knew his name, and we knew obviously that he died sometime during the First World War, but we didn't know when. And then lo and behold, I had quite a magic moment with my mother standing over my shoulder, and she'd never obviously met her grandfather. And I went on the internet and the War Graves site came up, and we tracked him down, and there his name was. And we found out that he was actually killed in action in Arras. There is no known grave, but his name is on the commemorative wall in Arras. Unfortunately, my grandfather then died, but he did know that his own father had been killed in action in 1917 in Arras. So the story was put to one side for a few years, and then eventually in 2008, I took my parents, my father and my mother, over to Arras. We had a stormy crossing. It was it was November the 10th. We had quite a stormy crossing. We drove down to Arras, and we found the site, we found the cemetery with the graves, and we found this commemorative wall. My vivid memory is just walking round the wall, one corner, turning another corner, and the names were just endless, and I just wanted it to end. We found his name under the Queen's Regiment. The height of the wall, I couldn't tell you in metres, but it was certainly twice my height. But my great-grandfather's name was within arm's reach for my mother. So she was wearing a poppy at the time, remember the date, the 10th of November, and she was able to take her poppy off and pin it alongside his name. The following day then we had a very, very emotional commemorative 11th of November with French there and the Canadians, because a lot of Canadians lost their lives in the nearby Vimy Ridge, I understand. It was very moving. The local dignitaries, the mayor, were there from Arras, and we stood shoulder to shoulder with another British couple, and her great-grandfather had been missing as well, and she had a similar story to tell. And then there were a few Canadians. Incredibly moving ceremony. I suppose the memory I take away from it is of that morning, standing there, and as you leave or as you approach the war graves, the site, the commemorative wall, there is an orb, a sculptured orb, and it is of the planet, and it's set in orbit, in position as it would have been on the 11th hour of the 11th day, 1918, on the Armistice Day. We were told then that the troops were held under the troops were under the town hall in a system of caves or tunnels, and the town was being heavily defended by the Allied troops, and it was being obviously attacked by the Germans. The men were underground, and just before the orders were given for them to go over the top, they were given whiskies. We were able to go visit the town hall. There is a little touristy circuit you can go down below, and you can actually see the places where the people were, the men were, whilst waiting for their orders to go over the top. So we saw where he was.
Whispers from the past.